Alrighty. Happy Labor Day, everybody. Class, yay. That's right. Dr. Sewell gave me a good perspective on it. I was in a meeting with her this morning and she was like, look, if it means we have one less day in December, I'll take it. So I was like, all right, I'll take that. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Gonna do attendance real quick. We're gonna finish up our lecture that we've been working through. And then we have a class assignment that y'all will do in groups. And then we might get to talking more specifically about digital literacy. Sometime in the next week or two, I'm still trying to work on his schedule. Stephen Leiss will be working with us about how to find credible sources, particularly using the VWU resources. So that will be another sort of shake up and things that make it a little bit easier for us. And I think I actually did a good job today checking y'all in as you walked in. So I'm just double checking that no one snuck in I didn't see. Okay. Maybe I'm to that point. We'll see. All righty. So we have been talking about various things about COVID and things about facts that we realize later on. New science shows us that our thought of those facts was not accurate, that those might not be facts anymore, right? And so these are some of the important terms that we are going to see over and over that your chapter talks about. So availability heuristic is a cognitive strategy based on obvious available information. And so if something is more readily available, if we've learned something in the past, this will come into play and we'll be like, oh, that's like this that I just heard about and that I've known forever. And obviously some of the problem with that could be if the initial facts we learned are incorrect, then this won't be correct, right? Then our knowledge won't be correct. In my heart, Pluto's always a planet, but it is not anymore, right? Effect size is a universal way of comparing the degree to which a variable either affects through experimental manipulation or is associated with through correlational research some sort of associated outcome. So effect size lets us look across lots of different types of studies. You might have studied different types of people, did different things, did different statistical analyses, and say, how do these compare? And then this is a really important distinction for psychology in general, but also for medical science, the difference between statistical and clinical significance. So with statistical significance, this is that the statistics show there's a relationship between variables. Typically, what we use is P is less than 0.05. This means there's less than a 5% chance that this happened on accident. Basically, we're 95% confident what we found are the true results. However, you can have statistical significance, particularly if you have a big sample. Let's say you have 400 people or 1,400 people in a sample. You can have a statistical significance between two groups that might not be meaningful to those groups. So let's say on a measure of depression, what you find is after you do an intervention, one group dropped 1 point in depression and the other group dropped 2 points in depression. Well, that sounds great. Double the reduction in depression, right? But then you look at the measure of depression and both of those are still in the clinically suppressed range, right? And in fact, in order to have a meaningful drop in depression for the person's way of life, it would have to be like 10 points down. And that's clinical significance. Does this actually make a difference to someone's life, right? If I go from a 44 to a 43 on the Beck depression inventory, I'm still in very severe depressed state, right? So that might not actually make a difference in my day-to-day experience of life. And so this is why clinical significance becomes very important, because we can get wrapped up in the idea of, the stats show there's a difference. This is awesome, and I'm as guilty as of this as anybody else. But then when you take a step back and you're like, wait, does this actually mean anything for the day-to-day person? Sometimes not, right? So this is an old article, I want to say the Cohen, a guy named Cohen, and he came up with the idea that effect sizes can be classified into small, medium, and large. And so again, you can take any statistic you've done, a t-test, a correlation, and an ANOVA, even like the more complex modeling that we do now, and you can turn it into one of these. And in fact, let's say I did a correlational study, so I have an R, but everything else I'm looking at is using a D. There are actually formulas I can use to convert the R into T and put everything in the same metric and compare it, right? And what you can see is that these might be generous, right? The idea that a small effect size would be a correlation of 0.1. So if you haven't covered this in other classes, it lets you know the smallest possible correlation is 0. The largest possible correlation is either +1 or -1. +1 is if as one variable goes up, the other one goes too. Negative is if as one variable goes up, the other one goes down. So 0.1 really is not that far away from 0. This is a very small, and some people have argued for that reason that perhaps this should be adjusted. But right now, a lot of people still use this. The idea that a 0.1 is a small effect size, 0.3 is medium, where we're really starting to talk about political significance in the large range, where we have a big difference, a big effect, a big relationship, and that's making a difference in people's lives. And one of the things that I think people often get wrong, and as much as like I should criticize that explanation here, I was a student journalist for all of high school, all of college. I was one of the editors-in-chief of our college newspaper, which was a weekly. But I think that sometimes journalists do themselves and the public a disservice when they try to focus too much on perfectly getting both sides of the story. Right, and I really liked this tweet that I found, and this was before the blue check was just something you bought. And this a balanced argument doesn't weigh two sides equally. It weighs the strongest evidence more heavily. Critical thinking isn't about representing every view. It's about recognizing your biases and giving serious consideration to facts that contradict your hopes and beliefs. Another analogy I've heard for this that I think is really good is like, if you are a reporter or a scientist or someone who's reporting to the public, and the question is it raining? Right? Your goal is not to get an equal number of people who say it's raining and it's not. Your goal is to like look out the window and see if it actually rains, right? So that we need to be thinking about what does the science say, and not just sort of people's opinions on science, who might not have any training in science whatsoever, right? Alrighty, so one of the things that you're going to be doing for this class, and you may even have had one for this first section, is you're going to be reading journal articles. And these are articles that are published in scholarly journals. They go through a process called peer review. And what's meant by that is you send it off to the journal, they find 2 or 3 or 4 people who are an expert in what you're researching. So like if I turn in something about body image, they're gonna find 3 people who are experts in body image and they're gonna read it. They're gonna give feedback, and one of several decisions can be made. One is just reject, like this doesn't contribute anything to the literature, this has fatal flaws, we can't publish this. The most common one I've experienced is revise and resubmit, where they're like, look, this is good, We think you can make it even stronger by doing these things to it. And then very occasionally, pretty rarely, they will just accept it outright. And so it's gone through that process of having other people who are experts look at it before it's published. Okay, and so peer review is an important part of science. It doesn't mean peer review is perfect. Okay, there are definitely instances in which peer review itself is flawed. Give you an example, you might get a peer review back and they're telling you to cite 5 different articles by Smith. And you're like, bet you this is Smith, right? So sometimes people have bias with things like that. And sometimes like people just don't know the full essence of what's going on. Like, so you could be an expert in body image, but then I'm sending in something about protective factors against body image, and maybe your knowledge doesn't align with that, right? And so you might struggle for those parts. So those are journal articles, and they're often written in very formal, jargony language. To be perfectly honest, I think this is another barrier to science education, is the fact that we feel the need to sound so like prissy and impressive in our articles, of which we just write, right? But when you get a journal article, the first thing you should think about is, why are you reading this article? For this, it'll be because Dr. Myers told me to, right? But think about it sort of beyond. Think about it like, okay, and we're talking about digital literacy next, right? And one of the articles that you're going to read is about ChatGPT, right? Why would Dr. Myers have us read this? Right? Oh, maybe because this is a really hot button topic right now, and we need to be thinking about the ethics of it. So for your first pass, you want to look at the title. What are they advertising that this is about? And then you read the abstract, that little box right at the top that'll have like a paragraph about what they found. It's a good summary of the article. And then read their introduction. Their introduction will give you the background and the previous literature and how they came to the question they asked. And then kind of ignore everything else and start to look at what did they find statistically to get at their theoretical foundations. And this is one of the best tips one of my grad professors gave us the first semester of grad school in clinical psych. You take 5 really intensive classes that all have a lot of reading. And one of the tips he gave us is read the introduction and read the discussion. So these articles are laid out: introduction, method, results, discussion. And he's like, the introduction will give you the background, the discussion will tell you what they found without going into the stats. Okay, so you'll get this information without being overwhelmed by the numbers. They'll tell you what they found. Their conclusions will be at the end of the discussion. So you can say, okay, does this make sense based on what they found? You can also look over the references. Who are they citing? What sort of articles are they citing? What journals are these in? And then you're going to look at the 5 C's. So category, what type of paper is this? So the paper might be a case study. And this is really common in certain fields like education. Or maybe they might have 1 student or 3 students that they really looked at in depth, right? It might be a correlational study where they gave people questionnaires and saw how their answers on those questionnaires related. It might be an experiment where they manipulated something and then had the person respond to the manipulation. So those are all kind of in the same category. Then you might have something above that, like a review paper. Sometimes people will do what are called narrative reviews, where they basically write an extended introduction where they summarize all the existing literature that's out there. Then you might have a more empirical review. These are often called meta-analyses. And this is where you take data from all the different articles that are already published, And each article becomes its own line of data. And so you can statistically summarize what the previous literature has said. Then you want to look at the context. What's the larger literature? What theories are they using to try to validate this, right? Or to propose what's going on? Right, this doesn't seem valid, or doesn't seem like they're way off in left field, right? Contributions, doesn't seem like they're, and the authors should say this in their discussion in particular, they should say, this is how our paper contributes to the literature. Here's what we found that no one else had found before. And then clarity, again, it's gonna have jargon, but is it at least understandable, right? And again, unfortunately, this is not always the standard. So for example, there is a therapeutic technique called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. And it took my grad advisor, who was a brilliant woman, like a month to get through the introduction, but she kept having to come back to it and come back to it because the language was so dense and so difficult to try to get at what they were actually trying to say with all of their SAT words, right? All their multisyllabic words. I try not to write like that because it annoys me. So then your second pass, you're gonna look at any sort of figures, diagrams, illustrations, graphs, tables. And then we want to mark references that might be of interest to you, particularly if you're reading this for like a research paper you're doing, or you're thinking of doing your own research study. Then you would go ahead and, these are the ones that are really relevant. And then virtually redo the study. This means in your mind, imagine what it'd be like to be the researcher performing the study or to be a participant in this study. What did they do? What would that experience be like? Does it feel valid as a way of looking at things, right? So this is a really great diagram, I think, of the parts of the journal article, particularly when you look at the first page. So up here, or sometimes at the bottom, but typically at the top, we're going to have the name of the journal itself. And it'll often have the year of publication, the page numbers it was on in the journal. And all recently published journal articles will have what's known as a digital object identifier, or DOI. And this is a link that anyone can click on, and it will bring them to where the paper is housed by the journal. You'll have your article title here, and then the authors, either with the author's names or with footnotes. It will indicate their affiliation to what university do they work with. Here's that abstract, that one paragraph that summarizes what they found. And then keywords, these are those search terms that you could put in if you want to find similar articles. And then down here at the bottom, the introduction starts. Some journals will literally say introduction, some will just start. But you can be assured that whatever's right after the abstract is the introduction, right after the abstract. One of the things we'll do in a little bit in this class, not today, but is to look at how do we cite things and reference things in APA style. And this starts to get at that idea of where do you find the stuff you need to do a citation or a reference. Alrighty. So now what we're going to do is do an in-class activity. And so what I'm going to do is just pass these out. And each of them, the third line down, basically have a title. So there's psychic traveling, apocalyptic beliefs, and near-death experiences. So once you've gotten your piece of paper, find the other people who have the same topic as you. So all the psychic traveler people, the apocalyptic people, and all of these near-death experiences people find each other. And read your blurb and answer the questions. Yeah, I was gonna say, y'all are gonna have to talk to each other to find each other. Yep, okay. So maybe take like another minute or two to finish up. And then make sure you have one or more people from your group who are willing to report out as we go over this. Alrighty, let's go ahead and have y'all report. So when you report, give a very brief, like 1 or 2 sentence description of the claim. and then answer the questions. So near-death experiences, y'all are up first. And let me real quick turn off our CR box just because I cannot hear y'all when you talk with it right next to my head. So, alrighty. Cool. So what was this hypothesis? Yes. And what evidence was there that they talked about?
And psychologists that study and some researchers in the review results that spread.
Yeah. And what evidence would you need, or what type of evidence would you need to disprove this hypothesis?
So there was a book in 1924 in Berkeley that suggested that the experiences were the result of cognitive brain chemistry. And there were also some others that suggested that it was the result of the mind's ability to reconstruct.
Yeah, exactly. So like, is this actually a like out-of-body life after death experience, or is it that having a heart attack or one of these other things that makes you almost die or actually lose, you know, like your heart rate can flatline, right? And they bring you back. Is it that those create, because they're traumatic, chemical reactions in the brain that causes, right? So yeah, exactly. So who knows? I mean, these are some of the fun things, right? Because people like to believe in some of these things, and they can be really hard to prove or disprove, because it's not like we can interview people who have actually died and stayed dead, right? Unless you're really good with a Ouija board. I don't know. I just saw, I don't know if anyone else has seen this TikTok of someone who like was cleaning out the attic from previous people, and they're like, we found a charcuterie board, and it was a Ouija board, and they were like, no, don't do it. All right. Our psychic traveling group, go ahead and summarize your case, and then we'll answer the questions.
So essentially, this article is saying that it's possible for people to imagine themselves in a setting that they stare at a clock set here.
Exactly. So what is the hypothesis here?
So the hypothesis is that your spirit leaves your body and travels further into the true yourself, while your body remains kind of frozen in other conditions develop.
Yeah, and what's the evidence that supports this?
And then once you kind of return to something that's
Yeah, and what type of evidence would we need to disprove this hypothesis?
so it really goes
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, and so this is really interesting, right? Because we know the power of visual imagery. People who are athletes use it all the time, right? You visualize yourself doing well, and you're more likely to do well. We use it in therapy. So in mindfulness meditation or relaxation, we ask people to visualize themselves in like a relaxing place, right? Or even for exposure therapy for people with anxiety, we might ask them to imagine they're in that anxiety-provoking situation and help them walk through things they can do when they're actually in that situation. And so, yeah, there is like power in visualizing things. Does that mean you're actually traveling psychically? Probably not, but who knows, right? I mean, it could be that this is like the type of fourth dimensional stuff we just don't have the methodology to study right now. Alrighty, and then our apocalyptic beliefs group. Go ahead and give us a little summary here.
Basically, had contact with Bishop Kings, and she told me that she was doing the whole thing. Then she told me always that all her state was
Yeah, and this is, I don't know if anyone else is like your side obsession is cult documentaries on like Netflix and stuff. That's me. I don't know why. Just fascinated. This is unfortunately like a very common scenario we hear from cults, right? Even if it's not extraterrestrials, in some way, people who are a member of the cult are going to leave this dimension, universe, earthly world, right? And be the only ones who are granted passage to heaven, ultimate dimension, the world of the aliens, what have you. Even down to like Scientology believes this, right? One of my favorite documentaries that became a series is Leah Remini's one about Scientology. And you have to get to a certain level in Scientology before they reveal this information to you. And she was sitting there and she and her mom were both reading it. She looked at her mom and mouth like, right? Like, how are we supposed to believe this? But you bought in so much by then, right? This is unfortunately what happened in the Heaven's Gate cult. If people are familiar with that story, that documentary was just like sad because these people chose to die by suicide because they thought that they were going to this alien dimension. Yeah, so what was the hypothesis that Mrs. Keach followers had formed about her?
Basically, like if she was the only one who received these messages, then she was special.
Yeah.
If their lives and what it's doing.
Exactly. And what evidence seemed to support that for them? Oh, just the next question. What evidence seems to support that?
Specific date and like place.
Yeah, and this has happened a lot through human history, right? Like, I don't remember if y'all remember in 2012 when they were like, the Mayan calendar is ending and therefore the world is ending. And it's like, they just never thought that like the world would go beyond that. It wasn't like they were predicting an apocalypse, right? And then what evidence would help disprove the hypothesis?
The world.
Right, the world didn't end, so there was your and this has again happened several times throughout my lifetime, even with various cult leaders or other religious figures saying the world's gonna end and it doesn't, right? And so here's where we need to use a grain of salt. And again, like, you know, not to diminish faith because it's so important. There's actually psychological research showing that faith and prayer can actually help you both physically and emotionally, but like being extra cautious of anyone who claims they're the only one who has the insights, right? To whatever higher power. Alrighty, excellent job, y'all. So again, just these are ways to think about some of this stuff, and a question that might look something like that might show up on your exam, for example. Alrighty, if you want, y'all can get back into your normal seats, and we got about 9 minutes left to start our next lecture here. Alrighty, and so digital literacy is something that is beyond important to understand in our day and age, because everything we look at pretty much now is digital, right? Even like, I know probably the vast majority of you for all your classes are using ebooks. You know, this class in particular, we're using an ebook. We're on social media, we're on YouTube, TikTok, you know, Instagram, what have you. And this is where we're getting a lot of our information. And so there are different types of digital literacy that we're going to touch on. And the first is photo visual literacy. And so this helps us to read visual and written information intuitively and freely. Understand instructions and messages representing visual information. Humans in general tend to have a very good visual memory and intuitive associative thinking. Because so much of how we get information about the world, for those of us who are lucky to be sighted, right, is through our eyes. We are really good at recognizing imagery, things along these lines. And so this is something that intuitively people are good at, but it's becoming a lot harder in this day and age, right? Photos, videos, why is it getting harder to trust those? Yeah, manipulation, right? Yeah. AI, yeah, we're gonna talk about AI, probably we'll get to it on Wednesday. But AI can now create videos, right, in addition to manipulating pictures. And deep fakes, are people familiar with what those are? So deep fakes is where you could feed, especially someone who's been in the media a lot, say an actor, a politician, you can feed hours of footage to an AI, and then it can like reproduce that person talking, basically. Yeah,
My grandparents actually had that little skin on the voices with my cousins.
that's terrifying.
So they, you know, didn't really get confused by the panic, they just asked a couple questions that they didn't know the answer to, and the person couldn't respond. It was horrifying that it was their voices.
Oh my God.
They're not like problem figures.
Right, right. But we do have videos. I mean, you could probably deep fake me. I don't know why anyone would want to, right? But there are hours of my lectures on YouTube, right? So even though I'm just sort of like your average Jane, I guess, not average Joe, in theory, you could deep fake me or, you know, anyone who has their voice out there. That's terrifying. I'm glad that your grandparents didn't fall for it, right? Yeah, so we now have to reset and try to figure those things out. Synchronic literacy is interactive stories told in, that's supposed to be digital game environments. Wow, good spelling. You know, I do have a PhD, doesn't mean I can always spell. There we go. Digital game environments, right? So video games are getting more and more hyper realistic, and I mean sometimes it's people or sometimes it's acts, like the game Stray, right? Actually, really interestingly, at my church yesterday, our sermon from our guest speaker focused on like digital environments and how sometimes they're so much better than what we have in person, and talking about that in terms of like solutions we could maybe come up with, and not only for like people but environmental things, but just the fact that like Sim City, for example, the way they solve the parking problem is like if you build a building, there's just a parking garage underneath it. Whereas you look at photos of actual cities, even our cities, they're all parking lots, right? Like let's say you wanted to go from furniture store to furniture store on Virginia Beach Boulevard. You would have to drive unless you were really like got your walking shoes on, right? Because there are just giant parking lots in between each one. And things like we are taught from a pretty young age now how to type. And even if we're not actually trained in it, we just learn. Like I remember there was a game called Typing Tutor that I used as an elementary school kiddo. One of my friends used one called Typing Shark, where you're trying to like not die from the shark, right? But for me, you know, what really got me fast at typing was instant messaging. This is before this was mostly on your phone, it was on your PC. And I know that dates me, that's okay. But like messaging with my friends from high school while I was in college, I got really quick at typing, right? So there are different ways that we learn these skills and different things we can do to manipulate here. So if people want, you can scan this QR code, but I'm also just going to click on the link to get us to this website. And this is, looking at a lot of the visual stuff we just talked about. Okay, so just looking at these pictures, one of the two is real, the other one is digitally or AI created. So who thinks the real one is this one? Okay, who thinks the real one is this one? All right, so folks are saying that one, I'll click on that one. And then it will tell us. The real image is the left one, apparently. Good to know. Alrighty. All right, looking at these, who thinks this is the real image? Everybody thinking this guy? Okay, again, I don't know the answers. So I'm finding out with you. This one was correct. Okay, so that shows, I mean, you all can go in and click this and play with this more if you want. But it shows just how much digital manipulation can be done now, where it's hard to tell what images are real and which are fake, right? There's a guy who I follow who's a speech professor, but he also does photography, and his wife asked him, why don't you enhance my photos the way you do for like the people you photograph and who pay you? And he was like, it's very sweet. He's like, because I don't see your flaws, right? But you know, it can be done. Like I remember even in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was getting my senior pictures done, even back then they could airbrush out any sort of acne you had or your braces. Photoshop wasn't a thing yet, but they had ways to do it, right? There's also reproduction literacy. It's really, I mean, I would say now more so than ever, so easy to reproduce and distribute digital information, whether you are just resharing something on whatever platform you're on, retweeting, refretting, I don't even know, right? Or just sharing something on Facebook. And you can end up sharing something that might or may not be true, right? So let me see. Yeah, let's stop there and we'll pick up with the pros and cons of this on Wednesday, and talk through some of these implications. But great job today. I enjoyed y'all going through the things or not. And Connor gave us some tips on how to find out the real versus fake one. So that's great. Cool. I'll leave that up there for a minute here. Yeah. What's that? Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I got to take them off. Oh, you're good. Yeah. That's okay. I'm just gonna give credit to everybody who was here. So you can either keep them, recycle them, whatever you want to do.
No, I.